Hello everyone, this is Taryn with Wonderfully Made Handcrafting, and today I am so excited that you're here to watch this voiceover. This has been actually one of my favorite pages I've ever created in one of my Bibles, and it just has a lot of meaning, and so I can't wait to dive in with you and show you what I did. I know I've spoken about it a few times on Instagram, and I probably will continue to. But I am currently reading Knowing God by J.I. Packer. And this book has probably been the most influential book I've ever read, and just in the first couple chapters. So it's definitely a book I feel that every Christian should be reading. I love how Packer writes. He writes very simplistically, but is really good at bringing these profound truths to us and making us think about stuff. There's constantly paragraphs that I'm like, whoa, that paragraph was really good. Let me go read it again. And you just keep on rereading the paragraphs because each time you read it, there's something else that you missed before, and it's just so good. So for this page, I actually typed up on my typewriter one of the concluding paragraphs of chapter 3 of this book. And Packer writes in this, he says, "What matters supremely, therefore, is not in the last analysis the fact that I know God, but the larger fact which underlies it, the fact that He knows me. I am graven on the palms of His hands. I am never out of His mind. All my knowledge of Him depends on His sustained initiative in knowing me. I know Him because He first knew me and continues to know me. He knows me as a friend, one who loves me, and there is no moment when His eye is off me or His attention distracted from me, and no moment, therefore, when His care falters." I've read this chapter so many times this week because it shows us how perfect God is. Because when we think of love, we think of all this lovey-dovey stuff and everything. And even, I love my husband, but my love for my husband isn't perfect. But we see this passage and we see that God's love for us is perfect. There's no moment when His care falters. He doesn't mess up. He doesn't forget about us. There's no fault in His love. So obviously there are so many verses in the Bible talking about God knowing His children. And one of those chapters is John 10. And starting in verse 26, it says, "But you do not believe because you are not among my sheep. My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. I give them eternal life, and they will never perish, and no one will snatch them out of my hand. My Father, who has given them to me, is greater than all, and no one is able to snatch them out of the Father's hand. I and the Father are one." So on to the crafty side of this voiceover, I ended up using some Distress Oxide colors in Pickled Paint, Speckled Egg, and Gathered Twigs. And I am just blending that out with some brushes and adding a little water droplets to the top to oxidize them. Now I wanted some spray too on the page, and I did a big uh-oh here. Here it comes. I did not like the halo effect of that spray. I meant to hold the top so it wasn't going to spray like that. It was just going to be droplets, but it didn't work the third spray. And so I end up just kind of blending it into the page, but I didn't want to blend. And so I'm just going to grab my Speckled Egg Distress Paint. No big deal. I know it's just a background, and I'm going to make it work. So that Speckled Egg Distress Paint will kind of cover up some of that halo effect. And I'm also going to come in with a stencil from Tim Holtz and use that peeled paint color again. So I'll use that around that paint splotchy area now, and that will kind of bring it all together, as well as I'm going to spray some white picket fence spray. So it'll all be okay. Like I said, I make a lot of mistakes in my Bible journaling. I've just learned to kind of not worry about mistakes as much anymore and learn how to fix what I can. So I'm pretty happy with the background I have going on here. I like all the colors and the oxidization. And so I'm going to dry this off a little bit, and then I'm going to do something really fun. I've been waiting to use this stamp set since Christmas. It is called Glorious Garden, and it is gorgeous. Definitely pick this up. I have never used this yet, but I am definitely using it more now because you can use just little parts of it, and it doesn't have to be perfect. And honestly, I kind of wish I just left the flower itself as the only thing, but I realized I can do another page with just the whole floral thing. But this was just meant to bring some greenery to the background of my cluster that I'm creating. I did have a lot going on in the background, so I wanted to make sure I used archival ink, and I used it in the color Ground Espresso. And see, doesn't it look so pretty? I'm definitely going to be doing a page with just this floral. But I seriously almost left it. But then I was like, I had already picked out all this ephemera and had all these ideas. So here's another one of those ideas. I grabbed my ink machine because I loved this new 3D Impresslets by Sizzix and Tim Holtz. It's that little frame. And I had done one before and then used the gold foil, and it turned out awesome. So I wanted to do another one for this page. So I'm running this through my Big Shot machine, and it's awesome because the Impresslets actually cut the paper at the same time as embossing them. So that's a really nice touch, and they're pretty inexpensive. So I'm grabbing these Distress Oxide colors in Pumice Stone, Gathered Twig, and Speckled Egg. And then I'm just going to use my watercolor brush and get some water and color on that frame. Now, I feel like the water kind of makes it not as embossed as it was before, but that's okay because the ink machine will actually flatten it out quite a bit. But here's my remedy for that. I end up doing the mink foiling, and then I will make sure everything is dry perfectly and good, and I will run that frame again through my Big Shot machine. So everything will come back out embossed at the end of it all. Here I'm taking out my mat for my mixed media mat, and this is the one I used to begin with and didn't know all the ins and outs of the little mat. So it is for my toner stuff for my ink machine because it's ruined anyhow, and so it's just my bad mat. So I am going to cut some paper out for this stamp set that I'm using. It is going to be just a seal, and I'm making sure that my frame is really dry from that water because I don't want to try to put the toner on a wet frame. So for this stamp, I am using a brayer and that toner. I just squeezed a little bit out. I use one of those little glass pipettes, and I drop some on the media mat. It helps a lot to get a good coverage and an even coverage on that. I'm making a couple of these seal stamps because I want to make sure I get a really good impression. So for this frame, I'm just running the brayer over the high points of the frame. It looks really silly now and I don't know, a little crazy. But don't worry, when you add the foil with the ink machine, it really turns out great. I chose to use the champagne foil for this project. Now the champagne is a little flatter of a metallic foil. It's not as shiny, but I think that will work great with the antique ephemera I have. The ink machine is really fun. I probably could have stood to just get the 6-inch machine, but there wasn't much of a price difference when I got my ink machine, and so I just decided to go with the 12-inch one. I actually keep it in a cupboard in my craft area because I'm not using it all the time, and it is a little bulky. Now I do have to say I did stamp on watercolor paper. I should have stamped on mixed media heavy stock or just the white heavy stock paper. The smoother paper you use, the better your ink machine foiling comes out. And so I was a little disappointed on how that watercolor paper turned those seals, but it looks old and antiqued anyhow, so it works out fine. But I did just emboss this frame again as those were going through. Here I'll show you. It kind of, you can still see the toner behind it. It is a little bit metallic, but not as much as it could have been with a smoother paper. I laid all my words out and I did number them beforehand. I'm not sure if you caught that, but I wanted to make sure I wasn't going to mess anything up because, you know, that would happen. So, made sure that everything wasn't going to get messed up, and I am cutting out these seals. I'm going to just use it in the background of this cluster. But before I get that all going, I am going to add a little bit of distress to these paper strips because I felt like they were just a little bit too white against the background. So adding what I have left on that brush, I think I used Gathered Twigs last on it, from this page actually. So this brush is always basically brown. I use brown a lot, and so this is just the makeup brush that I keep brown, and then I can use it for stuff like this. So here I go, grabbing my Barely Art Precision Glue. This glue is awesome. I know I say it all the time, but it dries fast. It has that super small nib for the top of the glue, so it's easy to get in little places like these little strips of paper. I know you all know how to glue, so I'm gonna skip over my gluing process, but I did bring this lettering down to the side because I didn't like how it was looking so linear straight up and down, and I didn't want to cover up those florals any more than I had to. So I kind of bring that over to the left hand side, and then I'm going to start working on this cluster. Now here I wish I had realized that everything was kind of pushed down. After working on my ink machine, I wasn't lined up perfectly with my Bible in the camera view, so you'll just kind of have to imagine with me for a couple minutes. But I did use a stapler, my tiny attacher, to attach the little letter to the girl, and then I'm using that Barely Art glue again to put the frame to that cluster, and I'm just adding J.I. Packer's name to the bottom. So I remember that this quote was from J.I. Packer. Now, this little label tape is one of Tim Holtz, and I just used a couple letters to add some layering beneath J.I. Packer's name. And what page could I do without fabric? So I found this pink fabric. It's so light and perfect, and it just makes me think what this girl's dress might have looked like. I've started doing more flat lays of my fabric behind the ephemera pieces. Usually I bunch it up when it's in my illustrating Bible, but lately I've been really turning to this interleave Bible. I really appreciate that I have a whole page to work with, and at the same time I have a whole page, but it also doesn't seem like I have to cover that much space because of the blankness of the page. I don't have to cover it all with a cluster and whatnot. Sometimes my illustrating Bible, I feel like I'm a little jumbled, like I don't have, either I have too much room or I don't have enough room. So anywho, interleave Bible has really been my go-to lately. I just wish it was spiral bound, but it's okay. Maybe someday they'll make it. I did grab some of the snippet ephemeras from Tim Holtz. I am grabbing this butterfly because I really want something in that frame. And I also wanted to add some more colorful florals. Now I'm thinking while I'm working on this, I really don't know where I'm going to add my date stamp, but I find this little tag. I'm going to make it, again, not so white so it doesn't just pop off the page as much, and I'm going to stamp that with my date stamp with my VersaFine ink, and I end up cutting it in half. I can use half of it again, but it just helps me layer it a little better behind that envelope card. Now for that butterfly, it did come with a pretty significant white border for how tiny it was, and I didn't necessarily want that, so I took my small scissors and cut that out around, but you could still see a little bit of that white border. So instead, I'm going to use that makeup brush that has the brown Distress Oxide on it, and I'm just putting that in my hand and brushing it to get rid of that white border completely. For the butterfly, I'm using that precision glue again and putting a dot on the back in the middle, because that will make it a way for those wings to be able to pop up. And then I am finishing this page off with some vintage Nuvo drops. If you've never read Knowing God by J.I. Packer, I really highly suggest you pick a copy up for yourself. I will have my affiliate link down below for By the Well for God site where you can pick it up, or you can look at your local library to see if they have one to borrow. But I highly suggest you have one for your own home library. If you've enjoyed watching this video, please like and subscribe to my channel, and please go ahead and follow me over on Instagram at Wonderfully Made Handcrafting. I hope you all have a wonderful day. God bless.